You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. I'm Cynthia Kirkpatrick. Thanks for joining us today. We have Courtney English, who's a trademark business attorney at Upscale Law. She helps families and small business owners through the whole life cycle of the business. And that's where I like to end and let you take over and say what you do.
Yeah. So, of course, I'm an attorney. So I represent small businesses from startup through their life cycle, which can be buying, selling, scaling, and anything that comes under that business umbrella. So contracts, trademark protection, brand takedowns. Really, I'm the one stop for business owners to get that full protection.
Okay, brand takedowns.
Yes.
That sounds cool. I want to know, what is that?
That's some of my favorite work. And that's actually a lot of how I built my firm was off of trademark law. And this is when someone steals your brand on like Facebook or Instagram, and we can get that back. So we're talking about copycats on social media handles or even domains. So they copy your website and they're redirecting your traffic, or they're trying to play off your name to get your clients or services. We can take those down.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, that's a big part of what I do.
We were talking before we got started how, you would want to have your own podcast. You could totally do this. And so that sounds like brand takedown is right up your alley.
And I do have a little podcast. I haven't done much with it, but yeah, I've dabbled.
So knowing you, because we've known each other for a year plus, another attorney introduced us who is also on the show, Catherine Flett. That does seem like your personality of let's get in there, let's figure out the law, let's take care of whatever we need to do to protect you and make sure you're safe. And so it sounds like with all the different areas of law, that's really what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I would say I fall on the proactive side of law. So I'm, get people when they're usually excited to build something. Unfortunately, I get them too when they're upset because someone stole their brand. But I really come into that space to help them scale and build instead of being on the back end where we're, in litigation or doing the courtroom thing.
Yeah, because trademark branding, that's really should be very early on when somebody's building a business. Like maybe even one of the first things that they take care of.
Exactly. And I walk through a framework with all of my clients. There's, usually 3 things you do when you first start a business. And I make sure they all know that. That's part of a free 15-minute call with me. I do not hide the ball. I want people to feel like they understand what they're doing and what they're getting into. So I always put that at the top of the list.
What are those 3 things?
Yeah. So the first one is always forming your business entity. So we're in the state of Missouri. Usually that's an LLC here. It's cheap. It's $50 to file it. Of course, you have fees on top of that, legal fees, but that's a one-time thing. You don't have to file annual reports. That's huge because a lot of states you do have to do that. And then the second thing is contracts. So if you're hiring people or you're selling services, you need a contract. And I've seen this go wrong so much. This is so preventable. If you're performing a service for somebody, you need a contract, or you're probably going to lose money because people aren't as great as we like to think they are, unfortunately. And then that final piece I say is that trademark branding piece, because that is your name. That's how people are going to search you. That's how you're going to make money. If you don't have that protected, you're running a huge risk. So I walk them through those 3 things and we break it apart in what phases we should do them. But within that first 90 days of opening your doors, all that stuff should be done, or at least, getting completed, because, you're running a risk otherwise.
So I'm sure some people think, okay, I'm just starting this little thing out of my house. It's kind of a hobby, a passion. I don't need to worry about trademark or name or anything. What do you say to that?
I say trademarks run offense and defense. So I'm not the lawyer to just say, spend money, you need to do this. You need to think about, could someone come after you? So even if you're in your home and you're not doing a lot with it, it doesn't mean that you're not infringing on somebody else. Someone in Georgia could have the same thing. And all of a sudden you have a problem with your small Instagram following, but this is how you made money. And they are entitled to damages. Not to scare you, but I have had clients who were that exact situation, and a company out of state came after them, and then we had to settle, and it would have been way cheaper to just get the trademark on the front end instead of settling out.
Or I would imagine finding out that it's already trademarked and changing your name of the business at that point versus down the road when you have you're sort of already established.
Yes, you don't get married to your names in the beginning. Don't do it. I have people who are so adamant they want this one name, and I do the trademark search and I counsel them on it, and I'm like, look, it's so risky. Like, someone's gonna come after you, and I look them up and they sue everybody. Like, don't do it. And they're like, but I love the name. It was my grandma's whatever. I'm like, that's great, but they don't care. Like, they're not gonna care. So let's just be realistic. They have attorneys in some other office that just sees the name and they're gonna just send you a letter, and don't get married to the name. So,
are there any, obviously without necessarily sharing any confidential information, but there are any instances that stick out to you where either it was obvious they were probably going to get sued, or even just something so out of the norm?
Yes. My first contentious trademark case I took on, I can't tell you who I represented, but I can tell you the other side because that is public. It was Rent the Runway, if you know the brand.
Yes.
Yeah. And the client I took on had a very similar name, and they sent a letter, and I was like, oh no. Like, I literally had a closet full of Rent the Runway clothes. And I was like, this is of course my first contentious trademark case. Happens to be with a brand that I support. But it was very obvious. And I kept telling the people I was counseling, like, look, this is going to be a problem. And finally we settled it out, and they walked away and rebranded, but it was very obvious. Yeah.
So in those instances, so say I'm, mom at home starting something, is there anything I should do up front on my own before getting an attorney? Is it looking for names out there,
Yes.
trademarked names to avoid?
Yeah, absolutely. You should, I always say Google first. That sounds silly, but if you Google, you can find a lot of stuff. And then after that, you say, I haven't seen anyone use this name the way I'm using it, or with my goods and services, because that matters. That's how we have Dove chocolate and Dove soap. They can coexist because they're two totally different things. So if your services are totally different, you can still coexist. There's a few caveats there, but that's kind of the blanket rule. And after that, you can go to the USPTO's website, which is the United States Patent Trademark Office, and you can do a free trademark search. Now, it is not a substitute for a lawyer, I have to tell you that, but it will get you started. You can look at it and say, oh, wow, everyone else is using this. I need to back off. And that's a great place to get started before you engage a lawyer.
It is funny. I know both Dove chocolate, unfortunately I do, and Dove soap, but I never even thought about the two potentially having the same name.
Yeah.
Just because, like you said, they're in just such different industries. There's different, I'm doing different things when I'm using either of those.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's how trademarks, we can have the same names in different lines of things. But the test for that is, could they be sold in the same channel of commerce? Meaning, could a customer be confused? Now, if a customer's looking up soap, they're not going to be confused by chocolate. But if they're looking up soap and then they find shampoo, that's pretty close. So we have to use that analysis when we search trademarks.
When we actually got started for this podcast, thankfully my husband has done this kind of stuff with his own business. We had different ideas for the name, and nope, that's already taken. Nope, somebody already owns that website, whatever, registration. And so he even looked, I think, on the trademarking and said, these are already taken. We kept looking before we settled on She Lift Project.
It is a process. It really is. And I tell people the domains are taken. That's a good sign that you probably should back off and redirect a little bit, because people will park those domains and then they see that you get the trademark. And then the next thing you know, you're getting a letter that's like, hey, you're infringing, but you can buy this domain for $30,000. I see that all the time. So there's really a little bit of a delicate dance you want to do before you file your trademark application and acquire those domains, because trademark applications are public. So people will search them and then gobble up the domain, so you can't get them.
So you almost want to be doing them simultaneously,
Yes.
or, get the website, the domain first, potentially, having already looked at the trademark details. And then, 1, 2, do them pretty quickly, but maybe website first.
Yeah, absolutely. If you just park that domain while you figure out the trademark stuff, you just need to own it. They could be $12, right? They're super cheap. And then all of a sudden you file an application, and their trademark application, and they're like $3,000. So you just be very careful with that. I've seen that happen many times.
So trademarking, brand takedown, and what other areas in small business law?
Yeah, we do a lot of contract drafting. So a lot of protecting people. I always say contracts set boundaries in your business. You didn't go into business to be taken advantage of, to be walked over. Most people I work with have left a corporate job to go into business. So how do we make sure that's set on a solid foundation and we have the boundaries in place of how we're going to build this thing? So that's where contracts come into play. So we do a lot of that.
So contracts like whether it's renting office space or, like you said earlier, hiring people, or I imagine engaging somebody else in some sort of business transaction.
Yep. Yeah, everybody, even my product-based businesses, they still need some language somewhere. So sometimes on websites, like contract can be non-refundable language. It can be warranty stuff that we have to deal with. It could be a VA they hire, virtual assistant. People aren't familiar with that. That's a very popular thing now. So those are all places that we would identify that would need some kind of paper there. And the good news is once you do that, usually you're kind of done. So you don't have to keep maintaining that.
What is the downside or like what have you seen problems arise when they're not focused or getting those contracts put in place?
A lot.
Not a fair question. But
that's why I always say I'm on the proactive side. Like, let's try to be proactive. Let's talk before you do this. A lot. And often I work with a lot of women business owners, and that was just kind of a natural fit, especially during COVID. Women were leaving their corporate jobs, trying to figure it out. And I was always here like, start your own business, start your own business. You can do it. So I've got a lot of them in my circle. And what I find is that typically them, and not to just, generalize too much, but they're nervous to push a contract. And I see that a lot, especially if they go into a joint venture or they have money backing. They're like, oh, well, he is giving me money to do this. So I feel like I can't ask for too much. And I deal with those all the time. I mean, on a monthly basis. And I always have to explain to them, well, this is your idea. Your idea is worth something, or he wouldn't be putting money into it. So we kind of play that game a little bit of like life coaching, I guess, business coach, all these different hats I have to wear to try to get them to see like you have value in this. This isn't just because he has the dollars doesn't mean he has all the decisions and all the power. So we do that a lot. And if we don't do that, we see a lot more problems. We see investors sometimes take advantage of business owners. We see problems between two business owners trying to do something together. And I can tell you like a $1,500 contract in one situation would have saved $50,000 in fees that they ended up settling out. A $1,500 contract is all that would have needed. And they were both totally on the same page when they first started, which is a great time to get a contract when everyone's on the same page and we're all eager to do something together, versus when you get down the road and greed starts to seep in. And then people start to have ego come in the picture. And then spouses sometimes can play a different dynamic. And it just starts to exacerbate the issue. And now we're dealing with lots of money and lots of problems.
And early on, it can seem like, I'm sure, like that's a lot of money starting off, or I'll get to it. I don't need to do that now. And life happens. And like you said, it goes from 1,500 to 50,000 or somewhere in between or above.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just one example. I've seen all types of things in between. And two, like I tell people, it's the stress, like the trade-off of your time. When you're growing a business, like you are the most important asset. Your brain, your energy, your time, your attention, all that is going to go into making this thing real and to scale. And if that is all divided between home, that job, and now you have this legal issue or a mad partner or a business problem, like how are you going to be able to grow? Like you usually can't. You kind of stagnate out when these problems come up. It's very rare that I see a business be able to grow when they're dealing with this type of conflict. Very rare.
So save time, energy, money, headache with the investment up front, but avoiding a lot of problems and more lawyers.
Yeah, right. The ones that are going to charge you a lot more and have many people in the courtroom with you. Yeah. So
what are any pitfalls or mistakes beyond some of these that you see, or maybe one stands out that when somebody's starting a business?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is going to be on the branding side. People, contracts are important, like I said, but I see people see these, Instagram has become this thing, right? Social media has become this thing. So it's so easy for them, like, ooh, I love that hashtag. I'm going to make that my brand name. And then all of a sudden we're wrapped up in all kinds of problems. So it's such a common issue that I'm often counseling on it when they call me and say, hey, I have this idea. I mean, I get many trademark calls and it's always, I got this idea, I saw this thing. It's like, well, do you own it? Did you come up with it? Like, we kind of have to work through that a little bit. And it's an easy thing to avoid. So I try to put that at the top of the list. Like, let's clear that name up because it's so easy to avoid.
So you're helping prevent headaches and problems and costs down the road.
Yes, that is the place I like to be. I am the problem solver. Let me get in the beginning. Let's make this smooth so you can actually call a lawyer that you enjoy talking to and not one when you have a problem. So
right. So you prefer not to be the one that they're calling when there's a major problem if you don't have to be.
Yeah, I like to get people when they're happy and excited to grow a business. So that's my favorite spot to be in because I can be their cheerleader, I can be their advisor, and we can get a lot done.
And the female thing you talked about was, I think, interesting because women do often just downplay or not give as much value or worth to what they bring to the table. Do you see certain types of partnerships or relationships where you're like, ooh, 8 out of 10 times that's going to be a problem? I mean, is it a male-female thing? Or is it just, it depends on the people, the personalities?
I hate to say it's male-female, but I think it is, just from my experience. It's very anecdotal, but a lot of women struggle with being a self-advocate. This is what I call it. And I don't think I've struggled with that. That probably has to do more with my upbringing, but I work a lot and there's with women that are scared to shake the trees, right? They're scared to like upset the situation. And I just think that's total BS, which I will tell them, like, it's okay. Like, how do you think whomever you're dealing with made it to where they are? Like, they didn't just sit back and play it safe, right? So I spend a lot of time kind of like pushing people to stand up for themselves. So kind of ghost write letters sometimes and emails to help them get comfortable with that and find that confidence, because I see it so much. And a lot of it can be generational. I don't see the next generation as nervous, but it's still there. It's still a dynamic we have to deal with.
Being a Gen Xer, and you're younger than me, so I don't know if you're probably not Gen X. You're probably
millennial.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I certainly can relate and see it quite a bit with the women in my generation. But it sounds like they're still baby, and I'm not far from millennials. But that again, maybe we're, as our generation, counseling others and having kids, we're helping the younger generations again just be more confident. And externally show that confidence and fight for it, like you said, with self-advocacy.
Yeah, it's so important. Your job isn't to walk in the room and make everybody happy and feel good about your decisions. And that's controversial, I think, because women are often raised to do that. And some people are natural people pleasers. I see that in my 5-year-old. Like, she wants to walk in the room and want everyone to have a smile on their face. And I love that. But the truth is, when you're in business, like, that's not your job. You got to think about yourself first. You got to feed your own house first, your own 4 walls. And you can't walk in and try to please everybody else, because you're going to walk out busy and broke. Just see it all the time. So you have to be important. It's very important to be aware of that.
Can you see that going in when you're working with somebody? Like, because you said you're going to walk out busy or broke.
Yeah, 100%. Now I can. I didn't at first, but I can now. I can tell. I can think of clients right now that I'm like, it's just not going to work out. And I'm honest with them about that. I said, if you keep acting like this with these situations, it's not going to work. And they like to ignore me. And then later on, they'll call me when they're trying to get out of it. So I just have seen it.
So listen to Courtney.
Yeah. I'm not, and I always tell them, I'm not telling you this for my benefit. Like, I'm really trying to look out for you. Like, it doesn't matter to me what happens. I'm trying to help you. So.
Yeah. And you're in that, a lot of times that's why we, especially as we get older and maybe we have a little bit more in assets to be able to bring in those experts. I always tell people that when we, at least in my lifetime, right, you get out of college, you start your job, you may not have a house right away, but when you do, you're cutting your own lawn, you're cleaning your own house, you're doing all those things. Then eventually you're hiring people who are good at it and do it 24/7, and you don't want to do those things anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, to bring in those professionals who you see over many, many years, all different types of situations, good and bad, and can come in as that third person
exactly.
party.
Yeah, and until you're ready for that third party, you gotta learn it. You are responsible. Read the books, get the podcast. Like, you are responsible for consuming that knowledge. It's your business. No one else is gonna step in and save you. So you have to be comfortable taking control and learning those things to do that.
Yeah, I often think, they talk about the people who are uber really, really successful. That's some common theme you'll see, is that they're constant learners. They're always learning about different things all over the place. So that's, I think, a very great point. If you were to tell somebody who's interested, like, what should do you have certain books or podcasts or areas, like, okay, do a little bit in marketing, do a little bit in this, what advice would you give?
I have been noticing my clients' books. So I've done that a few times. So that's right up my alley. So one of the big ones I tell people is The Compound Effect. If you haven't read it, it's by Darren Hardy, and it's a fantastic book about just getting your mind in the spot of these little daily actions will add up. So people get very disheartened in the beginning. They think, like, I'm not getting a lot of traction. I just spent money with you. And just keep being consistent in the right things. Don't be consistent all over the place, because you're really not. So that's one I recommend a lot. And the second one is the E-Myth, which is Mike, I think it's McCalswitz. I think it's his last name. So that's a great one for business owners as they're starting to make money. I always like to pass that one off, because what happens is they're wearing all the hats, they're doing all the things, and they can't figure out how to get out of it. They're like, well, I don't have enough money to hire, but I'm making enough money to feed myself and do well, but then I'm working 60, 80 hours a week. And they can't figure that piece out. And that's a great book to just make them aware of where they're falling and kind of what that looks like to move on. So those are two that I always recommend. And then I have a ton of podcasts I listen to. Listen to podcasts I was driving in today. I listen to podcasts constantly. But there's, you got to find your industry and where you market. I think marketing podcasts are fantastic because the information changes so much. Those books I mentioned, that information is just tried and true. It doesn't matter if ChatGPT is a thing. Like, that information is just good. But everything else changes a lot. So I advise podcasts for marketing. So that's where I go.
So Courtney's an attorney on her own now. You did the whole corporate thing, and you bounced back around, but you're solo entrepreneur. How does little Courtney, if it goes back to your youth, get to where you're at today to become attorney?
Yeah. So I will start saying I didn't always want to be a lawyer. I'm jealous of the people who are like, I want to do this since I was 5 and I'm so self-assured. Like, that must be great. That's not what happened. I grew up in a very small farm town of 1,500 people. There was the same kids in my class from 5 to 15. I can still tell you their birthdays, their phone numbers, their middle names. I never went to a school with air conditioning. I just grew up in a very small farm town. And I originally wanted to be an FBI agent. That was like my plan. And I thought that was the coolest job ever. It was investigating, and, you're busy and you're out in the field. And as things progressed and I went off to college, I kind of narrowed up more on law. I've always been an advocate, and I was raised that way, to question authority, seek truth, stand up for yourself. And it just was a natural fit. And I graduated college at 21. So I was pretty young, and I went right to law school. And I was like, I'm good at school. I'll just keep going. Like, I'll just go through school and figure it out. So, and that's really what I did. It was no grand moment where I was like, I have to do this and be this attorney. But I grew up in a small business family, and I grew up in a small town. So I understood the importance of access to an attorney and how a lot of people didn't have that. And it wasn't just because they didn't have the funds, it was because they didn't know who to ask. And that was a really common problem. So it kind of all came together later in life. But I just kept trusting each next step, and that's how I ended up here.
So you have, we haven't talked about it, but you have 3 little girls, get 3 months, 2 and 5. And we had talked about how you're trying to raise them to be strong, resilient, solve problems. You referenced there that you were taught to question authority, and I don't think it's in like a problematic way, but I think it's more of, as you mentioned, sort of standing up for yourself. As we think back to earlier in our talk here, that women and people sometimes have it difficult. What do you think it was about growing up that taught you those lessons that either we can teach people that we're leading in our own businesses, or our kids, boys or girls, to be more successful when they're older?
Yeah, I think my parents, they didn't believe on counting on people to make it happen for them. They did it themselves. And they only did that by questioning what they had been told, the status quo, so to speak. So my husband and I have those check-ins, like, are we being too conventional? That's like our running joke. So that we can kind of check in with each other to see if we're still trending that way of not letting other people hold the reins of our life. And so I remember vividly when I was a kid, I was in, I think, 7th grade in U.S. history. We were learning about Henry Ford. And I was always a great student. I mean, school was easy. It was great for me because I could just hardly do anything and get A's. So I enjoyed that. But so we learned about, he was this innovator, the Industrial Revolution, all these things. So I went home and I was telling my dad about it. And my dad's like, well, I'm reading this book about giants of enterprise. And Henry Ford wasn't a great man. Like, he was a good businessman in some ways. So he showed me, he's like, look, he employed people to keep them from running for office. His money wasn't always in the right places. Like, a lot of this is politically charged now, but essentially he wasn't what we thought he was. And it was fascinating. I mean, my dad, he didn't even finish high school. But he always pursued information like that. And he looped us in. So I read that and I went to school and I shared that information. And my teacher was not happy. He loved Henry Ford for some reason, but he was like, this isn't right. You're just pulling things. You're being disruptive, all these things. And I was like, no. He's like, well, bring me proof. I'm like, okay. So I went home. My dad and I found that, another book. And we just kind of highlighted and I brought this information in. Again, he's like, I don't want to see that. Like, just go sit down. And that's how I was raised. You can't just make a blind statement and expect everyone to get on board with something without backing it up. If it's your opinion, that's fine. But to teach a room full of 7th graders to think one certain way because you do, like, that's just not that's not how we make a good country, a good economy, all those things. So that's just a small example of many times in my life where I've seen my parents, they've taught us to advocate and to question those things we're told. So, I'm doing that with my children now, sometimes to my own dismay. So the tooth fairy came last night for my 5-year-old. The first time the tooth fairies came. So this is a big deal. So she walks out with her money this morning and she's like, I told you magic was real. And you said magic wasn't real. I'm like, I didn't say magic was. So we have to have this whole conversation like constantly. And my husband jokes, like, she keeps us in check. Like, he'll leave the house, she's like, Dad, did you get your wallet? Like, she's just on it. So I can see how like that parenting style is coming, but I talked to my parents and I guess I was the same way. So it's what it is.
Yeah, I often feel like the way that success is stamped in school a lot of times is the opposite of what it really should be, as you mentioned, like just memorize this and answer the question correctly versus, why don't you research for yourself? Why don't you ask questions? Why don't you try it a different way? And we sort of stamp that out of people.
Yeah, totally. And show me someone who's successful who has complied. Like, they just don't exist. They're industry disruptors. They're innovators. They are pushing to make things better world, better for themselves. And a classroom environment is really just teaching kids to kind of like fall in line and be good little soldiers. So there's a few examples to that, exceptions, I should say. But I wasn't challenged in that way, that like analysis and applying until I transferred schools my junior year. And once that happened, I was like, I have no idea how to think like this. Like, I think I do, but I don't know how to like get it out. And that changed everything for me when I realized that, my parents were pushing us that way, but I never had a place to like showcase that where that was accepted. And that made a huge difference.
And that was in high school, right?
Yep.
Switch schools your junior and senior year.
Yep.
I know why, but because
I went to a very small country school and they ran out of classes for me. Going into my junior year, I was going to have 2 gym classes per day. That was the schedule. And my mom, she was a fierce advocate with those schools. I don't think they loved her. If anyone watches this who knows her, they're like, oh yeah, I remember her walking in. So, because she stood up for us and she's like, this is ridiculous. Like, how is she going to go to college? And they're like, well, this is all we have. This is all we can do. And my parents made the decision. Again, we grew up in a small blue collar town to send me to a private school 40 minutes away, and managed to pay for that financially, which wasn't easy to do. And that's what I did. So I drove that every day, and in an old Chevy pickup truck. And that was, it's a private school. And I'm so glad I did. It made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, the even probably seeing her, showing you, walking in, stepping in, advocating, not settling was something that came to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when someone in our family has been sick or there's been something wrong, or any type of issue with like a government, body, she's always been great at like, this isn't right. I'm going to stand up for this, and like getting in the middle of it in hospital rooms when people are sick. Where's the head doctor? This doesn't make sense, and she's just always been like that. And my dad does too. He takes a different approach, but they both they don't settle for an answer. They're always really good about that.
And it's not like it has to be a black or white answer. It's not either you're complying or you're rocking the boat.
Right.
It can be, and I think we're taught that, right?
Yeah.
Like fall in line, be a good soldier, or if you're going to question, you're stirring up trouble. Where it's really, I don't understand.
Sometimes it's just that education piece. Yeah, exactly. And it's frustrating when you're in a situation where, one, you can feel helpless, right? Especially if you're in a hospital or you're a student in a school, you don't have a lot of control. So you feel kind of helpless. And then second, people are telling you things that you just don't get. And you're like, I might be okay doing this, but I need to understand it. And I think we find ourselves a lot in those situations. And I was raised with don't find yourself in those situations. If you're in it, question it. Doesn't mean it's the wrong answer. It's just you need to understand it.
Yeah, question for learning.
Yeah.
Not questioning to be a problem.
Yeah. You don't just try to be disruptive to be disruptive. But if you can, if you understand it and you have a different conclusion, by all means, speak up. But, that's not always the goal. Sometimes you just start with trying to gain that understanding.
So we talked about college, and then just I might as well go to school longer, get my my law degree. I start out, I'm sure most people probably start out a big law firm that, big corporate. Probably I was in accounting before what I do now. And when I was in public accounting, you had to charge every 6 minutes of your time. So very structured, bring in business, work on billable business, that sort of thing. How was it to go from smaller community to big company firm?
Yeah, it was different. Like I said, small farm town, but I remember my dorm room in college had a revolving door. And like, I think I'd only been in those in one time in my life. So when I was 18, I was like, I don't know how to do this. And I remember my brother visiting me, and he was younger than me, and we both like got into the same stall together. Like, if that's not an example for, trying to navigate a whole other world, I don't know what is. I was always good at just learning and just trying to kind of assimilate. But it's hard, especially when you go to law school, because they change the way you think. And I think that gets underplayed a lot. I think a lot of lawyers like to tout it out like, oh, it was so easy. It's not. And, I see obviously many lawyers, and they will tell you secretly that it's really hard because they're changing the way you think about things. So when you come from an environment like I grew up in, or, you don't grow up with lawyers, you're not used to that. That can be really difficult.
Change the way you think, like what, in what way or how?
Yeah. So I would say question everything, but I was already doing that. But they change the way you analyze things. So before, let's say, I'm just going to use Roe v. Wade because that's been a hot thing. So Roe v. Wade, when you grow up and you learn about that case, it's just like, oh, a woman's right to choose. That's all it is, right? You get into law school and you learn it's more about that. It's like a right to privacy. And it's more, there's a lot more depth to it. So you start looking at everything else in your world that way. Like, well, I've been told that this just gives a woman a right to choose, right? Well, no, not exactly. There's a lot more in that case than just the right to choose. So you start seeing things in your world that way. Like, maybe it's really not what it seems. Maybe there is more to this. And you start to question, and you start to apply the things you're learning differently because you're getting a framework that you've never seen before. And maybe if you were raised with lawyers, you've seen it. I don't know. But I've never seen it. So
it's like, don't just stick to surface level.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different angles.
And in understanding that it's not as black and white. And I think that was a big deal for me. I think I was raised with like level of morality and integrity and thinking everything was so black and white. In that people were complex, but the rules were simple. And like, why couldn't you just kind of fall where you need to fall? And then I got into law school and I realized like the rules are not that simple. They don't always play fair.
And maybe one day, right? Maybe way back in the day, it was more like that because there wasn't as much of everything that we have going on. But now it really isn't that simple.
No. No, it's not. And, you think what's right and wrong was always a simple, for me, that was an easy thing. Like you could look at something and say what's right and wrong. Once I got into law school, I was like, wow, this isn't at all. Like there was many times where I find myself like kind of siding with the bad guy on certain things. I'm like, I can't believe I even think like this. But you see things differently.
I really want to pause and stop and say, ooh, give me an example of like where you would maybe side with the bad guy.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to Roe v. Wade for a moment. So in that case, I was always raised, not really, we weren't raised religious, but, I developed a opinion over the years on the right to choose, thinking like, well, right to life matters more. Well, once I read the case, I understood the right to privacy. And I was like, we have a right to privacy. So then I started siding with, quote unquote, the other side on this, because I can see how like we have a right to medical choices and a right to privacy of our own bodies. And, I started seeing things differently, and people would be like, I can't believe this. Like I can't believe you even think like this. Like but you start to see it differently. And, that's a hard thing to undo once you kind of see that.
Yeah, the many different layers, like all of those unintended consequences and ripple effects that just saying that baseline, it's about choice.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
much deeper than that.
In our political climate now, like this is not more true. People see a headline and they think, oh, well, this is what's going to happen. And like, while that may seem great to you now, like think about that ripple effect. Think about the nuances of how that's going to happen. Like maybe it is okay if we choose someone that's not as favorable to get something else done, because we have to think more downstream consequences. And I don't think I really did that until I got legal training, but those consequences, they affect us probably more than what we see in the moment. And that's what people don't.
Well, even the headlines, I caught this the other day. Like a lot of times I'll just scroll through and I'll see headline, but don't have the time to actually read into it. Mm-hmm. There was one that I clicked on. The headline was almost totally different than what the article was about. And they almost discounted how they chose to write the headline.
Yeah.
And I thought, if you had just read that headline, you would be going full force with this thing is bad, bad, bad. And it's like, but this rarely happens. Like,
Yeah, and how many people do that, right? They catch the headline and they come to you and like, well, didn't you see this and this? And you're like, that's not the whole story. And that's another piece of it that we've got to be better about that. As a society, we really need to be better about that, because things just get so charged so quickly because of that.
Right, and the whole social media and the algorithms and things they talk about, which I don't know anything about. But to say that they're just going to keep feeding you with the things that you want anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So now we're losing that thought and what they taught you in law school.
Yeah, exactly. And we see so much of that. So much.
In general, or in the business that you're in?
Both. In the business I'm in, people will take one piece of information and be like, I heard that Missouri passed this law, or tariffs. Like it'll just be one piece of it and come to me panicking, and I'll look at their situation like, this isn't even going to apply to you. Like your company's not big enough, or you're not sourcing from this place, or whatever it may be. It's not going to apply to you. And people spend so much time getting themselves, like, I would say, just kind of wrapped up in knots, right? They're overly anxious. They're reading these things and they're just bringing it to you. And even your most successful business owners, I mean, they're people too, right? They're, they could fall into these traps just like everybody else. So they just need that reassurance sometimes. And you just kind of have to step in and suss out like what is true, what the law actually means. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago and someone got up and spoke about this new law in Missouri and how it's going to affect all these business owners. And I was like, that's not the law. Like I couldn't like interrupt her. I'm like, that is not the law at all. And she's like, it's in Missouri. I'm like, well, it's actually a federal law. But like, she just kept kind of going on. And the guy next to me owned a pretty big business. And he's like, you didn't tell me any of this. I'm like, because it's just not like the real. So, and then we had to like walk out later. And I asked her, like, where'd you get this? She's like, no, I saw this headline. And she's showing me. And I'm like, you are doing exactly like what they want you to do. You just invoke fear in a room full of business owners. They all think they have to comply with this thing that they don't have to. And so then afterwards, I'm like bombarded with questions. And, that's one example. This happens all the time. People get up, they think they know things because they read those headlines. And then everyone's all freaking out. And you're like, it's not that big of a deal. You have to kind of do damage control.
So I think of, I know different attorneys in different areas, lots of areas of law. Mm-hmm. Why trademark, small businesses, branding? What appealed to you or stuck out to you on that?
Yeah, it gave me a good place to want to be proactive, but also I say counsel people in a way to help them have their own livelihood. I'm really big into, I would say, sticking it to the man, so to speak. I think people can, take control of their own lives. They can make their own money. They can have that power to do that on their own. And I'm a big believer in that. I've seen it my whole life. I've seen people do it who come from nothing. And I wanted to be in an area of law that supported those people, that could help them protect what they built, but also like help them grow and scale. So again, I didn't grow up in a lawyer family, so people have different views on this. But for me, it was just kind of a simple answer. Like, why wouldn't I do something I know? I know business. I grew up in a small business family, and I'm really good at solving problems. So why wouldn't I come into a space to help people make a better life for them and their family and, protect them?
So big firm, why go out on your own?
Yeah, so I was on my own before I went to a big firm, and then I went back on my own. So I think that speaks to my personality, not to them. But
yes, we talked about that a little bit to start.
Yeah, I'm just an entrepreneur at heart. I really am, and it's hard to go into somewhere and where your creativity just can't flow as freely. Sounds kind of hippie, but it's true, right? Because if you own a business, you have some level of creativity in you. It's creating marketing, branding, whatever. And that was just hard. It's hard to be somewhere where you can't innovate constantly and grow and do things in a way that you can serve your clients, because you have just red tape. It's just the natural way it is. And I respect what those firms have built. I do, but for me, like, there's got to be a better way to practice law than just tracking hours. And, I think I figured that out. So.
Well, and we were talking before, it's like you're just that entrepreneur, kind of, not in a bad way, but, don't want to necessarily have to deal with authority.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be your own authority.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And I'm not offended by that. No, I don't. I mean, it's, why give someone else the reins to control your life if you don't have to? I understand some people's personalities trend that way. My husband is not a risk taker. I've kind of made him a business owner, but he's just naturally not. And that's okay. But like, I am, and I'm comfortable with that. So why not go for it?
A lot of probably my learning in my more mature ages, we'll call it that, just older. And a lot of people that we've had on the podcast in various industries, whether it's they're a coach or they have a consulting business, whatever it might be. I think it's really important, and my husband and I are talking this weekend, that I really want to sit down with my kids and get them to talk about or think about who they are. Mm-hmm. For many reasons, but one of them that you just said there was to know who you are and know, I don't want to be, answering to somebody else. I want to answer to myself, whereas it's okay if others want to do that. But really, it comes back to who are you at the core. And it sounds like you are a lot like this from an early age.
Yeah, definitely. I was always known. I had always have had bright red hair, and I was always like, oh, that redheaded girl in class is like, she's always so, questioning everything. I've just been known for that, but luckily I make a grade, so I kind of made up for it. But it just, it's just the way I am. And my husband, on the other hand, was just the guy he knew how to be stable, right? He was just very stable and could stay focused and not be the disruptor. He was always funny and charming, but he knew how to also do what he had to do. And I just don't think I was ever like that. I was always in well, why can't we do it differently? Why are we doing it this way? It's just the way I am. And I can see, I have 3 kids now. I can see in their little personalities, as they're developing some of that too, the different pieces that's going to make them them. And it's nothing that we've really nurtured to be any different. It's just, I think, how God made them. Their personalities and who they are they're just different.
I have 3 and they're very different. And when I look back, they're in their teens now. When I look back to when they were young, even babies, you can see the signs of, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Yeah. I can start to see it starting to come with my 5-year-old. I'm like, oh man, it's but I'm also grateful that I feel like she'll be okay in the world, because she is pretty self-assured. She's very confident. And I'm like, okay, you're going to do fine. A little difficult to raise sometimes, but you're going to be fine when it counts. So,
right. When you do, and they're going to be out of your house longer than they are in.
Yes.
So I guess, as I'm saying this out loud, better to make sure they're set for the post your house world versus what you have to sometimes deal with when they're
I think parents get that wrong a lot, because we want it to be easy, right? Like, it would be so much easier if I didn't explain everything to Lily or try to get Cece to make her own mind up. Like, it would be so much easier if I could just kind of like force them. But like, we always have to check in, my husband with each other, like, what are we raising them for? Like, we're not raising them to live with us. Like, we're raising them to be in the world. So we got to like think about those little lessons. So.
And you said it's hard because I think my brain's turning a mile a minute as we're talking here, goes back to something I'd seen or heard where it's like, choose the easy things in life and life will be hard. Do the hard things in life and life will be easy. So as a parent, when you're exhausted and, both parents working and all of this stuff, it's whether it's as a parent or as a leader or a business owner, I'm sure it'd save a lot of time and energy on the front end to cut corners and do the easy thing versus take that time to explain. And
it takes up a lot of time, but we do it. We've always had an agreement that when we had kids, which we've stuck to, that one of us would be more flexible than the other, or if both of us could be flexible. That way someone was always making sure we were running point, that the things that matter to us were being taken care of. Even if that meant less money in our household. Those were just sacrifices we were willing to make. And now I can see it since, my 5-year-old's 5. It's like crazy when they turn 5. It's like a whole kid, You're not in a toddler land anymore. I could tell, like, my husband and I were talking about this last night, like, wow, we're actually doing an okay job. Like, she's turning out to be pretty good. She spent the weekend with her aunt, so she wasn't with us. And we got raving reviews when she came back. And, it's just like, okay, like, all that sacrifice, because you're just grinding. When you're little, you're just grinding. You're just doing. And it's like, okay, it's paying off. So sometimes you have to check in on that.
Right. Just make sure course correct. Are we still in relatively that same path? But I often think that being, a leader, whether it's a coach of one of your kids' sports or Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, whatever you name it, you're a leader in some form or fashion, or a parent or a leader in business. That a lot of those things are all the same. They cross over.
Yeah, if you've raised kids, you can run a business. I tell so many people this. Even if you haven't, if you've been in any kind of coaching capacity or running people, because what you're doing is you're trying to just like figure everybody out around you. Like, that's a big part of parenting, coaching, any of these things, working with clients. Like, you really got to read them. Like, that's your job. You can't walk in think you have all the answers. You've got it figured out. That's the biggest mistake people make. I see lawyers do this a lot, right? Because then they're just giving like mini law degrees to their clients, and they're like, I don't want to know all this. I just want the answer. So you kind of got to walk in and read the room a little bit, and then respond accordingly. Not just what you already had in your head. And I think that's a big part, I think, of succeeding in any of those areas.
Your success, both knowing to leave the big company, go out on your own, continuing to do this type of law and really specialize in it. Still in my head from our first conversations, or as we started, this was brand takedown. And I just think like in my mind, non-attorney, I'm thinking, yes, we're like the power either probably on both sides, right? Whether you're defending or taking down. What do people need to know about that? I want to get some stories, but what do people need to know about branding and brand takedown?
Yeah. So brand takedown happens, you really need a registered trademark for that to happen correctly. Otherwise, we're kind of cowboying it.
And that's if you want to either defend yours, right, against somebody else, or if somebody were to come after you, if you've got that trademark, you've got...
Yes. Yeah. It's really the first line of defense. Like, that registered trademark, it holds so much power and protection. I mean, you can register with U.S. Customs to stop the importation of counterfeit goods. If you have a registered trademark, you can take down domains. Like, there's so much you can do. Instagram recognizes it. Amazon, it'll boost you up in the ranks if you have a registered trademark. So there's a lot of things that come with that. And that's just like a small piece of it. So you really need to start there. But then when we're taking down brands, if we have that registered trademark, we use a proceeding called the UDRP proceeding. So I'm not going to like legalese everybody. Their eyes glaze over. But it's an international proceeding. And when like GoDaddy, Name.com, all these domain companies sign on to sell domains, they have to agree to an international treaty. And the international treaty says that if we have registered trademarks, you cannot sell this domain to somebody who does not own that trademark. So the way we do that is we have to get them back because it happens all the time. So this international proceeding that we file, it goes to courts in The Hague, and it's all in a different language, interpreted back to English, and comes back. So you could read it eventually. And most of the proceedings are in English now, but some of the stuff is kind of foreign. And you submit all this to them. We have a registered trademark. Name.com is a good example. I'm going to just call them out because I deal with them a lot. They sold this domain to another company. This company is not the registered trademark owner. And then you write out these complaints. I mean, they're pretty lengthy. They're legally heavy for sure. And you submit all that there. There's a panel that reviews it and comes back and issues a decision. Most of the ones I've done, I would say 95% of the ones I've done, we've won them all because we've had the registered trademarks and we've had the proof and we've shown that this name was wrong. So what happens on the back end after all that legally stuff gets cleaned up, the domain holders have, like name.com or GoDaddy, has to release it to the rightful trademark owner. So they actually pull that domain back and send it off to the trademark owner. So then the trademark owner now has all these new domains. So that's a huge part of brand takedown, is getting that back, because that's your, people are Googling you. That's how they're finding you.
So when we talked earlier in this podcast about maybe, do the research, see if the domain's available, see if the trademark's available, maybe do domain first, then trademark. Mm-hmm. If you don't, and you do trademark first, and let's say somebody else grabs that domain right away. They hadn't had it before, but they grabbed it after you trademarked, but they're going to try to sell it to you for $30,000.
Yep.
Is that where then you could come in and say, no?
Yep, you can, but it's going to cost you to do that. That proceeding alone has heavy filing fees that can run from $1,500 to $3,000 just in the filing fees. That doesn't even go to me, that goes to them. So that proceeding can cost you quite a bit too. It just depends on how valuable that name is, kind of where you're at in your business. We're always weighing those things. I always say that I'm weighing like real business application and practical decisions against legal knowledge. And I think a good business lawyer should do that. So we're weighing those things out and picking the best path.
So not necessarily just saying, well, we've had this name, it's our right, et cetera, et cetera. The law is by our side, but it's going to cost us, like, really what makes sense here. Yeah.
Let's be, as people, they always say they want to do it off principle. I've had many of these, and one of our lawyer friends will tell you the same thing. And they always say, it's off principle. And then the bills start coming in. And they're like, oh, principle starts to mean a little bit less, right? Because if it's just off principle, like, we're really grabbing for things, right? We're trying to find everything we can to support you, but like, it can be really hard when it's just off principle. Usually we need something a little more factual.
Any stories in that realm that stick out to you, whether it was, I thought we were going to win this one. You said you win all of them or most of them, or, I thought there was no way in heck, but we did. Like, when somebody's going to go into that realm, what would that be like?
I will tell you, I have one that I couldn't believe I won that was recent, and I was honest with the client. It was a trademark registration. Had a hashtag in it and had a curse word in it. I don't know if we can curse on this, but it had a curse word in the hashtag. And I was seeing how she was using it on her website. And when you apply for a trademark, you get office actions, which are basically requests for more information. So they can be like big deals or they can be little things, like give me a picture of your sign. Like it just depends. In her situation, they kept refusing it, saying like, this isn't used properly. It has like all these things. And I had one last shot, because you get so many shots to argue. And I was just like pulled everything out I had. And a big part of how I, work with clients is education. So when I go back to make an argument to an examining attorney in the situation, I'm trying to educate them as I walk them through it. So I take that approach in everything I do. So I was just walked them through it and wrote out this argument, and we won it. We got it. And that just happened last month. So she's very excited. But I'm also like, in the future, if we do more trademarks, please do not make them like this. Please, this one was kind of a Hail Mary in a way. But I find that if I can educate people on things, I can usually lead the horse to water, right? Like I can get us there. And that worked out really well. So that's a big part of why I'd say I practice a little differently, because people joke, if I call you, I know I'm going to get like a life lesson, but I'm trying to give you, some more practicality here than just like do this thing. I'm just not an order taker. There's attorneys who want to do that, but that's just not where I fall.
Yeah, in my business, non-podcasting, the one that's actually the career, like that's very much what I love doing, is saying, okay, why are we doing this? What are we doing? Here's all the background information. Now, most of them will tell me, like, I'm not going to remember this in 6 months, which is fine. We'll go over whatever we need to go over then. But that's the fun part. And I think builds more of that, we're a partnership or a relationship versus my attorney told me to do this.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I want in my life. I mean, I'm sure you do too, right? You want people you can work with that it feels like a real relationship and not just like, just do.
So I've got to ask though, why do you think it was so hard for her to get that? Is it because of the curse word? Are they anti-curse words?
They're not anti-curse words. I actually got a couple of them are just for curse words, way worse words. But in her situation, she's a doctor and a coach of types, and she was using it in her print on her website instead of like at the top. And I kept trying to get her to change things, and she would change things, and it just was like, just not enough, just not quite enough. So that one was tricky for sure. So I had to dig through a lot and write up some solid arguments for her, which got it through. But she's just a very creative person. And I have a lot of these clients. They're very creative. So when they're that creative, they come up with great names and branding and they build businesses. They have a hard time kind of understanding how to put all that in line, like compliance. And that's really where I'm good at, is like, let's bring that creativity and like synthesize it. And like, this is how we have to make it look just for now. Once it gets done, afterwards, you can do whatever you want. So we do that.
I'm married to one of those.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm married to a creative type. It's like, but this is how the real world works. Let's bring it, rein it in for at least a little bit.
Just a little bit. We just need to be in a line a little. Yeah. I get that. I always joke they think in circles, like some of my creatives, because it's just like, yes, this is masterful, but like, who's going to buy it if we don't have this other part set up, So
do you see that probably as a big trend in entrepreneurs, is that creativity?
Yes. ADD and creativity, man. Those are like the two things they're like, yep, you are a business owner.
And I was just thinking, and then, they need somebody to rein them in to get the basics done. Like they really need this done. And then, okay, free up a little bit. Run, horse, run.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly where I fall, is in that like kind of reining them in, getting them on a path. And just for a little bit, I need your attention, then go. Yeah.
And then, we'll reconnect down the road when something comes up. I'll give you another lesson. And we'll move on your way. So, you're winning, you're doing great things, you're winning cases or getting their things approved. But along the way, I'm sure not everything was maybe smooth, or maybe you stumbled into success in ways when you look back. You're like, wow, I was really lucky to have that lesson. What are some of the things that, whether you're sitting down with your daughters or someone, you would say, here were the obstacles I had to overcome, or the things I learned along the way?
Moving to St. Louis. So if you're from St. Louis, you understand this whole high school thing, right? This matters a great deal to people. So when we moved up here in 2019, I'm originally from Illinois, but I went to law school in Florida. My husband and I lived in Florida for a while. We loved it. Then we came up here. So I want to start a family. And when I first moved here, I had to take the Missouri bar. Found I was pregnant right before I took the Missouri bar. So that was a whole thing. And then I got licensed, and I was like, okay, how am I going to do this now up here? Because down there I had a great corporate job. And I'm going to network. I'm going to build my own practice. I'm going to have a baby. Like, I need to have flexibility. This will be great. And I started going out and networking, and I was just like, why is this so hard? Like, people just want to know where I went to school. Like, my parents, like, they're asking for my social security number. Like, this is insane. And I made it happen, though. And it was because, one, I was persistent. And two, I just, I try to meet people where they're at. I just try to understand them. So I'm like, you know what? I can't come in with how great I am and here's all my accomplishments. Like, I'm from out of state. Like, they don't care, right? So I'm going to just try to understand them, understand St. Louis, understand these people, and just try to meet them where they're at. And I did. And that was such an obstacle at first, because I didn't think it was going to be like that. I remember like giving out business cards, like, oh, I'm an attorney. They got a small business. This will be easy. And they'll be like, oh, but do you know so-and-so at so-and-so firm that went to this school with my brother? And I'm like, what is happening? Like, because I was in Florida, it was so transient. Like, it just, people didn't care. And it just took a lot of that. And I kept at it. But what I did learn after being here for 6 years is people in St. Louis are extremely loyal. So if you can get into the circle and provide true value and you care about them, like, they will be loyal, and, vice versa. So that was definitely something that I had to wrestle with that I did not anticipate at all.
That makes sense, though, because I would have thought, well, that should be normal everywhere. But in Florida, with it being so transient, people moving in, moving out, etc., they probably don't have as many of those, right here. Like you said, well, so-and-so was siblings with so-and-so who, roomed with my brother in college or whatever it might be, that it's less about probably not opening up or letting outsiders in, and it's more about, well, I already have these connections and I'm super loyal.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you, because I will tell younger people now, I think one of the lessons I learned, or I would never stop networking.
Yes.
Never stop getting out. Even if you get at a point in your career in that industry where you think this is where I'm going to be forever, I don't need a network. Even if you're internal at a big corporate company, you should be networking inside the company at different divisions and things. Never stop networking. And so what you said, I just have to be resilient and persistent. I mean, is that really what it was? Or did you have things that you realized that you used that worked?
Yeah. I would say persistence was a big part of it, but also like the way I talk to people, I had to be, I was constantly kind of refining my pitch in a way, but also just refining the way I, what I was looking for out of them, the information I needed to understand. I remember when I was in high school, I went to the fancier private school that cost a lot of money, but at least back then, I had a counselor tell me one time, if you're in a room networking, like make it about them. And I was like, who networks? Like, what does that even mean? I was like 17. I had no idea how that had ever come up. Then here I was years later thinking, oh my gosh, like that thing that counselor told me, make it about them. And I did. And I feel like I actually love that now. I love hearing people's stories. I love talking to people and just kind of stepping back, and just like life is so much richer that way. And I think that was a key part in succeeding in networking, is like, don't go in with what you're trying to sell, who you need to know. Those just burn out. It can't just be so transactional.
But let's say, so then I also see the flip side. Somebody will say, okay, well, that only works for so long. Then my business is out. I'm out of business because I haven't turned anything into business. How do you go from, and I 100% agree, make it about them, ask a lot of questions. You're barely talking about yourself. But how do you then flip it to either that was your only interaction ever, but, really carrying it into more conversations, more maybe connections from them, and turning it into business, because that's why you're in business, is to be successful and make money.
Absolutely. You got to give them a way to say yes. And I think people get this wrong a lot, just from what I've seen networking. Like, you're not necessarily out to hunt for a lot of new best friends, but you can still build good relationships with people that you can count on. But you got to make it easy for them to say yes or to refer you. So for instance, when I say the word like brand takedown, right? Like, it's a buzz. People are like, oh, what is that? So then if you're out and you hear someone like, oh, someone stole my social media page, the first thing that's going to come to your mind is like, oh, I heard brand takedown. Where was that? It makes it easy to connect me with them, because I'm using things that are going to kind of spark some interest. So you're making it easy for them to say yes. And another way I make it easy for them to say yes is I have a free 15-minute discovery call. Super simple. So if I'm out networking with people and like, oh, I have a business, I'm like, oh, well, if you ever have anything you want to run by me, I do free 15-minute calls. Like, I'm happy just to chat, but it's about them, right? I'm helping you. I didn't go into business for me, like partially, but I went into business to help people. Like, I do what I do because I actually care. And that always works. So
it sounds like refining your pitch and certainly sort of, I don't want to say finding those buzzwords, but do find those things that sort of stand out, and quick, concise, as I'm not being right now as I'm explaining this, quick, concise buzzwords, refine your pitch, and try to offer those ways of, if I think in my world, like if somebody's talking about, oh, my kid's going to college. Well, hey, if you ever want to, ask me questions about saving for college, give me a call.
Exactly.
No problem. Or if you've, get some tax information that you're not comfortable with or you're not sure about, just give me a call. We'll talk through it.
You're listening for the opportunity. Yeah. That's a big part of it, is listen for that moment, make it easy for them, and then just kind of back off. And nobody wants to be constantly pestered. There's certain industries, I'm sure we know, that you go out and network with, and then you just get the constant emails and the phone calls and the one-to-ones, and like they just want what you have. It's not reciprocal. So you have to be kind of careful there too.
Because I think early on in your career networking, right, you've got to get out there. And you just, whether it's the events, one-on-ones, you've got to be out there a lot. And then you get to a certain point in your career where then you have to be wise about,
Yes,
because hopefully you've been building your business, that you can't just be doing all of these one-on-ones, because then you wouldn't be doing the business. So there's sort of that evolution and shift, and making sure then at some point you get really intentional with, what is a good investment of your time.
And building relationships with people who can refer you. So when you're not out hitting the pavement all the time, and the people who are, and you built like a relationship with them, they're going to refer you. So that helps a lot too. You're kind of building like a little bit of a sales team in a way to go out there. And you should be doing that for people in your circle too, who you do a good job.
Right. Yeah. So it's not going to happen, that first time out, you meet them at an event. It's going to take some time to build that relationship, to build those funnels, if you will. Yeah. And you sure better be on the other side trying to do that where and when you can. And I often tell people, I just want to meet really good people. Yeah. And at this point in time, you may not, your career, your job, your profession may not be something that, day to day directly helps my clients. But I never know when I'm going to be out just talking to somebody randomly. I was like, wait a minute, I know somebody in that world. Let me just try to connect you. You can't do that if you don't get out there and ask questions and get to know what people do.
Yeah, be helpful. Just be helpful. It's a very simple equation. I know I met a company about 5 years ago when I first moved here, and he had a large company, and he was like, I don't really have a fit for you. I'm like, okay, we just had a coffee. It was very simple. And I wasn't really looking for anything out of it. But then years later, last fall, actually, he's like, hey, I want to give you my whole book of business. And I'm also going to make you like the primary person I refer. And that had just taken off like wildfire. That happened in September. That was all from a relationship and a coffee I had years ago. So you also don't know where it's going to come. And we didn't stay necessarily in contact. He was extremely busy, but it was just enough. And then someone else mentioned my name to him that he met at another event. And he's like, oh, I met her. Yeah, that would be a perfect fit for what I need. And that's all it took. So you don't always know. You can't control as much as we think we can. So we kind of have to just trust some of these things are going to work out.
Come on, you're telling a type A, CPA, I know, right? OCD, I can't control everything.
Yeah, we just have to trust.
I'm glad that my husband only listens to what we're saying and doesn't have a microphone over there in the corner and can't chime in on that and control. So any other things that when you look back, or even currently, that you're like, wow, that was really helped me become successful?
Yeah. Really knowing the right people, just networking with the right people. That was huge for me. I didn't understand the value of that until later. And for instance, I just happened to get a neighbor who was tied in with a large accounting firm, and she's wonderful. You should have her on here. But she's a business development person, and she's just knows everybody. And even if she couldn't connect me to somebody, she could give me an idea of where I should go. And that was just so valuable, just like these key relationships with people. And I'm just so grateful for that. And, that was really big to my success. And I got that from not being quiet, from not complying, from going out, asking questions. I saw her walking her dog many times, and I'm like, I'm just going to go bombard her and just be like, oh, hey, we're new. We just started talking. We started working out together. Just little things evolved. And you have to be comfortable doing that, taking that step.
And I think for me, it's been trying to take a step back and look at things differently. If you believe what you do is helpful, if you believe it solves problems for people, then don't you want to find the people? Because, I'm sure in your business, people are like, oh my God, I'm so glad I found you, Courtney. Like, you just saved the day, da. So if you're not putting yourself out there, you're almost robbing the world, robbing other people of your skills and your value.
Exactly. All my language is very service oriented too. Like my website, the way I talk to people, and I believe I say it, like that's how I'm going to behave and that's how I want to be. And I can help you. And by not doing that, you're exactly right. You are taking that opportunity away from them. You're only hurting them by not speaking up.
And you said that obviously there's the caveat, don't be that annoying, like in somebody's face where it's all about you.
Yes.
But also don't forget the fact that you back to earlier parts of our conversation, have the confidence, self-advocate, that you have the skills to really have positive impact and change somebody's life with the knowledge and what you do for a living 24/7, what you're good at.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to just, you're robbing them like of that opportunity, and that's really important.
I'm as we're saying this, I'm still telling myself inside my head, remember, and practicing and getting back out there. And we'll definitely share that name after the podcast. So when we think about people who you typically work with, or, people out there who are listening, and or they may be in a conversation one day and be like, wait a minute, I heard this podcast, or I already know Courtney, you got to talk to her. What are the types of people, who are they, businesses, et cetera, that would come to you and do well with what you do?
Yeah, so business owner is a little bit broad. That's obviously who I serve. But it's a big part of my client base are women who left corporate jobs. It's a large part of them. So I'm talking like, CEOs of larger companies, COOs, marketing executives, directors, like you name it. They're women that have like kind of risen on the ladder, even just for a short period, and realize I can't do this anymore. I have kids at home. I have, a marriage that needs attention. Like there's too many different things going on. I need to step back. That is a big part of my practice, is those women. And they come to me a lot with like, I got a little bit of money in the bank. I don't know what I'm doing. Where do I start? And that's a great spot for me because, like I said, it's not just the legal, like I'm giving you the business side of it because I do this and I've seen them and I've seen the inside of a lot of businesses now. And then I can tell you like what works and what doesn't work. So those people, I love to work with them because, they're doing this for, all the right reasons.
So what's an example of somebody like that? I think of, like a C-suite or somebody that's high up, are they at like I don't know, a Nestle Purina, a place like that, and they're all of a sudden like, hey, I'm going to make dog biscuits or cookies for dogs. Like what
I have those. I do have those, yeah, in my client list. But I also have like a more common one that I will see. For some reason, it's like HR people. I don't know why. It's just like very common. It's like they got the MBA, they work in the HR or marketing side, and they work for a large company, and they're like, you know what? I could go do this somewhere else or on my own. And that's what spawns it. Typically, they come to me after they've already done a job search. So they're like, maybe it's just my company. Maybe I just need to go to a different company. And they start doing that and they realize like, oh no, this is gonna be the same way everywhere. I need to go on my own. That's usually when they tell me, and I've interviewed at this other company, that's what I can tell, like, okay, you're ready to do it. You're ready to step out. But those people, like, for instance, with an MBA in HR, I think of one client that I'm kind of using as an example. She had her third baby and she was like, I'm doing everything. And then my husband's stressed when he gets home because I'm not here. And like, we're just kind of have this dynamic. And I have to stop and ask myself, like, what do I want our future to look like? And, he's working all day too. And she's like, I need to step back and do this for them. But I'm also like really busy. So I need like my mind to be worked, right? Like I always, my husband says like, I'm like a border collie. Like I need a job. Like you can't just be sitting here doing this. Those are the perfect people for me to work with because they come to me like, I have this idea. I ran the numbers, like they're diligent, but they also want to do it the right way. And, they're not just playing around. Like this is going to be a business for them.
So, and that's where, again, they could start with the trademarking, the branding, the contracts.
Yep.
Keep sticking on the buzzwords, but the contracts are important. So a lot of people who are potentially leaving, a career at a big company or, even several years, whatever it might be. And hey, I want either I don't like authority. Or, I want to do it on my own, or I need more flexibility. Yeah. But essentially, they want to start something.
Yeah,
on their
they have
own.
a reason they want to. And I've actually gotten quite a bit lately, the past year, I should say, of people calling me just like, can I pick your brain for an hour about starting this business? And it caught me off guard at first because I was like, sure, I know a lot about business. But I realized they were referred from a current client who was like, she helped me get over this obstacle. So then I started kind of finding myself in this space of just consulting with them. It's a little bit outside the legal work. Eventually it leads into legal work, but we're just kind of chatting and talking about what your dream is and how you want to do it and how could we scale it? How do we market it? And just getting those wheels churning. And then later on, they'll come back for legal things. But that's a really fun spot to be in too, because you're helping them make that exit. And they're always really hush-hush. They're like, I'm in my car, on my phone, during my lunch hour.
Which sort of goes back to when you wanted to be an FBI agent.
Yes, yeah. Let's investigate into this. Yeah.
It all comes full circle.
It does. Yeah.
We're mic'd up.
Yep.
You can't hear. Yeah.
It's all in the DL. Don't say anything to your employer. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun.
So when I'm thinking of all that, it's lawyer / consultant / a lot of other business area creativeness that you're
I have no idea what the title is. I don't know. Just me. I
was just pulling some words out of my head to say it's more than really getting the legal things checked off. Mm-hmm. It's the whole education and consulting around that so that they can be, or at least be in a better position to be successful. Yeah,
you should be making money when as we're working together, you should be making money. That's like my thing. I don't want to be a lawyer where I'm just a sunk cost and you move on. Like, I want to help you. So like, you're still bringing in clients as we're working together. So yeah, you might be paying me, but you're also bringing in revenue. Like, there's a value add beyond just the paper you're walking out with. And that's something I'm always trying to play with. Like, how do I say that? How do I offer that? But I just naturally do it. And it's just a big part of how I operate.
Yeah, it sounds like something that you're interested in, that drives you, that you're passionate about, that's a compliment to what the knowledge that you've gained by helping so many people, and a compliment to those legal check marks that everybody has to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So people are like, wow, I need a lot of help in consulting and I want to run things by her. Definitely, I'm tired and stressed out and burnt out, and I want to try something on my own. How do they find you? Where do they go?
Yeah, so my firm is Upscale Law. So the brand really speaks to a lot of the clients I serve. They're trying to upscale their life. They want to take a step. And you can find me at upscalelaw.com, or you can email me. My email is all on there as well. It's Courtney@upscalelaw.com. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I like to post little tip videos for business things. And I have that, as well as that podcast I dabble in that I mentioned that I will one day be more consistent at. But that's Bold and Branded as that show.
Yeah, and with 3 kids, going back on your own again and your own business and helping so many people. And I see the videos that you do, and I don't get to watch or listen while I'm like, there she is again. There she has another video. I'm like, one day I'm going to be like her on LinkedIn. So you've got a lot going on. And
often I'm in gym clothes, really good filters. I'm in my basement, holding it up after a workout. I'm like, I have a tip. So
doesn't matter. It works.
Just get it out there. That's how
You're out helping people, and it's more about the message and the education than it is in the format. My husband might not like that over there, but in the format or what you're wearing, it's about the content and helping people. So obviously, going into this episode, I knew that's what it would be about. It was about education and helping people. Clearly, so much over-delivered, and just the things you had to share. So I want to say thank you, one, for the networking that we did long ago. Yeah. We've just hung out and become friends, and we have more friends around us, and your willingness to come on the show and share your journey and share what you do and help people out there. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit sheliftproject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.